Hello again. This is the second part I wanted to add. I had made a mistake when I mentioned the book on the Wrasse book. It is by Scott W. Michael, is the author of that book, by the way, and it's excellent. You can get it on Amazon. It's like, I think it's called Wrasses and Parrotfish, and it's an excellent reference source. It has almost every kind of wrasse you could possibly imagine in that book. And I did want to add one more thing that I failed to mention in that first video, is that, as you can see in my tank, I have a sea urchin right there. That's part of my cleanup crew. There is a orange serpent star. He's kind of shadowed by the by my fan worm there. And I have a lot of brittle stars. Luckily, they're nocturnal. They're underneath the rocks now. That one is kind of taking his life into his own hands by being out in the open during the day. You know, wrasses are when they say reef safe, there's coral safe and there's reef safe. Wrasses aren't going to harm any of your coral, you know, but they are not, as far as, you know, a cleanup crew, shrimp, snails, crabs, you know, especially with the chorus wrasses for sure. And the red chorus wrasse, he has decimated every shrimp, crab, snail, anything I've ever put in this tank, he's eaten. So there's no cleanup crew except for serpent stars, brittle stars. Luckily, if they only come out at night, that one there, you probably can't see it in this light, but he's missing 2 legs. They do grow back, but you know, he's killed a couple smaller ones, no problem. But most of them are nocturnal. Again, they only come out at night while the wrasses are sleeping. And one interesting thing about wrasses, these wrasses here, these 2 chorus wrasses, these leopard wrasses that sleep in the sand, they come out, and nobody really knows exactly why, but they come out at the same time every morning, and they go to bed at the same time every night. You could set your watch by it. You could watch and go, oh, so-and-so just went to bed, and know what time it is. And nobody knows if that's the clock from whatever part of the world they're from, whatever ocean they're from. Nobody knows exactly why, but that's kind of interesting. Another thing is I get asked questions about my anemones. I have 4 anemones. I got 3 bubble tips, and then I have, which this is a question I get a lot, I have my blue carpet gnome, which is a you know, which is a Hadani carpet gnome, and it's a pretty good size. And a lot of people have, you know, wonder, well, can you have anemones with fish or, you know, whatever? And since we're talking about wrasses, it is always a risk when you have a carpet anemone with fish. What I've had to do, like with leopard wrasses, especially the smaller ones, when I put them in the tank, they kind of are disoriented. And when you're first putting them in after you drip acclimate them. So what I've had to do is put my hand in there and put my hand over the anemone, make sure they don't just drift themselves straight into my anemone. But it's always a risk having an anemone. These, you know, most fish realize that, you know, they come from the ocean. These aren't, obviously wrasses, to my knowledge, aren't captive bred at this point in time. So they have some kind of, you know, they stay away from the anemone, the carpet anemone. Now the bubble tip anemones, you know, the red chorus wrasse, for example, when I'm feeding these bubble tip anemones, and lately I've been hand feeding them more often to get them back into health, he'll swim right in there and take food right out of the anemone if I don't keep my hand in there to keep him out of there. But the carpet anemone, you could feed them no problem. Not a wrasse in this tank will go anywhere near it. But that is always a risk. You know, that is something to consider. You know, however, I've always wanted, you know, several years ago when I set up my tank, I've always wanted a blue carpet anemone. You know, it's blue. Sometimes it looks purple, as you can tell. Maybe it's purplish blue or bluish purple. I've always wanted blue, and I've had green ones in the past that have they get absolutely huge. This particular carpet anemone can reach 2 feet in diameter. So, you know, that's always a risk. And as everybody saw when I did a video on the red chorus wrasse, you know, if you take a look, well, like for example, here's my Wrasse clam, and he's growing. He's an Aura Wrasse clam, raised at their Aura farm. And I don't know if he might have came from the Marshall Islands at the Aura farm there. I'm not sure 100%, but he is an Aura Wrasse clam, aquacultured. and he's grown quite a bit. But I have to have, he's placed kind of at an angle, and he's placed close to my carpet nem because the red chorus wrasse can't flip him over. He likes to flip him over and look for stuff in the sand underneath him for whatever reason. And if he does, he'll get his tail stuck in my carpet nem if he tries to flip him. So that's why I have my clam placed right here. And when you look at my corals, there's a torch coral, and it's glued to a rock. This is actually 2 Aura red flower pot coral frags that I've been growing for the last year, and these are both glued to this heavy piece of rock right here. This is my mushroom leather coral, and I had to actually sit it up. I figured he couldn't tip that, but it's light enough. No problem. He tipped it over. So I had to sit it up on a piece of rock, which luckily it fit right there. Here's these 2 acan colonies right here. I had to glue these to a nice piece of heavy live rock. I'm kind of a live rock hoarder, and so when I get chunks of live rock that I don't use in my main aquarium, I will put it in the back of my in the sump area of this tank. You know, unfortunately, there's not a lot of room back there, so you kind of can cause trouble. So I'm trying to kind of keep that down a little bit. And then these are 2 larger pieces of acans. All these came from Australia. And this is on a large piece of live rock, and they have to be heavy enough that he won't flip it over. It's amazing how much strength they have and he will work at it until he gets it flipped over if it's not heavy enough. But these are both glued to the rock. Here is a purple alveopora from Australia, and this is also glued to a nice chunk. And here is my frog spawn, and that's glued to a nice chunk. And there's also a torch coral glued, and luckily these are Zoa rocks, and they're heavy in and of itself, but I chose to make kind of a bridge kind of deal out of it, and that my anemone happened to like that spot, so he can have it. What I use to glue, which works excellent, I've tried putty in the past, for the tank, and all it did for me was overflow the skimmer, and it didn't stick at all. I don't know if I didn't use it right or what. So I quit using it. What I use is I like the I don't know if you can see it here. This is it's kind of not very good lighting, but anyway, I use the C-Chem Reef glue, and it's the cyanoacrylic reef glue, and I absolutely love the stuff. Works excellent underwater, and with the torch coral, the skeletons, I actually had to glue those underwater, but and also the flower pots I did too. And until I realized that, well, obviously people frag corals outside of the water, so they can, certain corals have no problem being outside of the water for a short amount of time. So I glued these outside of the water, which made it a lot easier to glue them in the spot you wanted and whatnot. So you keep that in mind with any of the wrasses. They'll say reef safe, yes. Or reef safe, no. Keep in mind, they're not going to bother your corals. I've never had any, they're not going to eat your coral like angelfish might or something like that. But you definitely cannot have a cleanup crew other than some serpent stars and a sea urchin. So, you won't be able to, they'll eat everything else in a hurry too, in short order. I mean, like in this tank, I've dropped in hermit crabs in the past, and my red chorus wrasse ate the hermit crabs before they even hit the sand. That quick. So that's my part 2. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.